All right, hi everybody. Thanks for joining today. Feel free to jump in and use the chat functionality. I have my trusted assistant and life partner in the next room manning the chat. So that's Robin. And he'll help out with any technical issues. He might be able to answer some of the questions if they pop up, or he'll field them over to me as well. How we're going to run the session today is I'm going to go back and forth between some slides and showing you some techniques and tips and also doing the live cook. So I don't know if anybody is going to be cooking along, but I've done the bulk of the prep already and it's sitting there waiting for me just so that you don't have to watch me chop onions and garlic because I figure, you can probably figure that one out on your own. But I wanted to show you how I set up my prep to make the cooking a lot easier. So I'm going to start off by let's look at the agenda here. So I'm going to do a little bit of intro about me and about Zesty Plan. I'm going to talk about the beginning of the name of our webinar, which is Food is Fuel. So talk a little bit about nutrition. Then we're going to touch on techniques, safety. I need to start the cook at around 10 or 10:15. So if Robin doesn't tell me to start cooking, make sure that, or 11:15, 11:15, make sure that you feel free to poke me in the chat and remind me that we need to get started just to make sure that we're able to complete it on time and I can show you everything that would be good to show you. And we're also going to cover a bunch of different plant-based ingredients and different combinations that we tend to use in plant-based cooking. And then we'll also have a Q&A at the end. I'm sure we'll have ample time for that. Before I jump in and tell you a little bit more about me, though, I wanted to ask a little bit about you. And I'm really curious as to what really inspired you to jump onto today's session, whether it's that you already eat plant-based and just want to learn some techniques, or maybe you're trying to add some more plant-based cooking to your meals or your week. Feel free to just pop in the chat and give everybody a little indicator as to why you're joining today. It might also help me to be able to pause and take some time onto some different aspects of the class that we'll be covering today. And while you do that, I'm going to pull up the slides here. There we go. Okay, I didn't see anybody pop in the chat, but feel free to use that as much as you want to. If anybody's having trouble using the chat, let us know. You should be able to message Robin directly. And excellent. So Jane's trying to add more plant-based eating to their diet. And for me, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. So that is me there. And I'm just going to make sure everything's okay. We got audio and video on. All right. So I've been eating plant-based since various levels of plant-based since my daughter was 9 and she decided that she'd adopt a vegetarian diet. She's 23 now. So that was a while ago. And through that process, she actually went entirely plant-based and then it switched. So my partner and I went plant-based and she stopped being plant-based. But regardless, it's been a long time that I've been trying to incorporate plant-based eating into our family meals. What I did find when my daughter went plant-based was that it was difficult for me because I was so used to cooking meat and relying on the flavors and fat from meat and cheese to provide a lot of flavor in the dishes. And when I would cook food for my daughter, that's in the embarrassing picture to the right of my picture, when we're all at medieval times. I really found it tough to get enough flavor in the plant-based dishes that I was making for her. So I got lazy. I would buy a vegetarian lasagna or something like that. It wasn't until I went plant-based myself that I actually realized that you have to cook differently. You have to use spices and techniques to put flavor in the food as opposed to relying on some of the fats and flavors that come from meat and cheese a little bit more naturally. Uh, so that's what we're going to talk about today. I am a precision nutrition certified nutrition coach. I've also taken a certificate in plant-based cooking. Taking part currently in a certification for plant-based nutrition at the University of Guelph. One of my recipes was also recently featured in the newly released Beans is How a summary document for their Canadian launch. And I'm also the founder and CEO of Zesty Plan. So Zesty Plan is a platform to help people make more climate smart decisions about their food. And what's great about plant-based eating is as long as it's minimally processed and closer to whole foods, really anything plant-based is going to be a better option than meat-based proteins for the planet. So it is just really a healthy eating approach as well. But Zesty Plan not only has a platform and an app that you can download for free in the App or Play Store to help plan your meals and get ideas for recipes and actually use some AI to generate some of those yourself. We actually do cooking classes in person and classes like this one virtually. Our newest in-person class, it has just launched. We're going to be doing Vietnamese cuisine here in Toronto. It's going to be fantastic. Tanya Spacek is our guest chef, so we're doing at her location. And the picture that you see on my far right is of us doing our plant-based comfort food class, which was so much fun. All right, so the other thing that we do is some coaching. I did note that I am a nutrition coach. We do both one-on-one coaching. I do both one-on-one coaching as well as group coaching. And I'll talk a little bit about some of my clients as we go through this so you have an understanding of what that does or what that looks like. All right, let me just go back over here. So talking about food is fuel. So many of you may already be aware of this, but what we eat has a significant impact on how we feel. It really does impact our energy levels. If you think of how you might feel after you have like a really big dinner and you're like really, as your body is working to process all of the food you've given it. Or if you have ever had that feeling when you're doing a really heavy exercise session and you need fuel to actually keep going. You can feel your muscles start to get weak usually after about 45 minutes. Also impacts how quickly we recover. So in particular, when we are injured or after that really hard workout, we need fuel to actually help us recover and heal. Protein in particular is really good for healing. So if you've been injured or if your muscles are sore as part of that really hard workout, it's the protein that's going to help to actually help those muscles and any other soreness. Or I know I had recently broke my arm, actually. This was maybe a few months ago. And I really made sure that I was eating my protein to make sure that helped to heal me. And it impacts how clearly we think. So we can get really foggy if we're not well hydrated, if we're not fueling ourselves with a diverse number of fruits, vegetables, and lean proteins. So it's super important. I'm going to talk a little bit about more as we go through. Sorry if I stumble a little bit. But that's how I thought we could start off. So if you're just joining, we are going to go back and forth between some slides and some of the demonstrations. So now we're going to get to some of the technique side of it. So I'm going to close down the slides here. And and you'll get a view of me. I'll also be tilting my camera back and forth like this. So this is just a regular laptop. I'll be tilting it back and forth so that you can see. Feel free to stay off camera, come on camera, whatever you're most comfortable with. Um, you know, you make that decision. So I'm going to talk a little bit about technique. So one of the things that is super important to know, and this is in one of the slides, but I can just say it, is that the most dangerous thing in any kitchen is a dull knife. The sharpness of your knife keeps you safe, and making sure that you are regularly what's called honing your sharp knife is important. So we get our knives sharpened once every 6 months or a year. A lot of people will do it a lot more frequently than that, but for us, that seems to work. And then every time before we start cutting, we spend time honing the knife. So if you've seen like a steel like this, that might come with your knife set. So we got that, one of those knife sets. It's really simple to hone the knife. You want to put it on a nice close angle and just go back and forth. Some people like to excuse any dog bark. Some, some people like to do it away from them. This is the safer choice. You'll see some chefs will do it towards them. This is the way that I was taught when I worked in kitchens, and I can do it really quickly towards me, but I've been really trying to get used to doing it away from me. Make sure that you get the whole blade. The part of the blade that you tend to use the most is going to be between here and here. So sometimes this and this is like the sharpest type part of the blade. But anyways, nice close angle. And there we go. We've honed the knife this time. The one thing that you want to know as well is that this honing process also leaves little pieces of the blade loose, right? So as you're sharpening the steel, there'll be little pieces that you can't even see that are sitting there. So we're going to go ahead and go like this. If whoever's talking,
being the good mom that I am, I'm going to do some research to see if that's the case. For example, one of my children
I
left this
think somebody's
here on the
speaking. Let me see if I can mute that. There we go. Okay, I think that's good. Great, thank you. So just going ahead and wiping off any, remnants that might be on the knife before you get into chopping. Now, this may be some basic skills, and I'll give you a copy of the slides afterwards as well, because there's actually some photos of this. But when you are chopping your fruits, vegetables, whatever you're chopping, and this is basic cooking, not just plant-based cooking, you want to make sure that you are protecting your fingers, especially because you know how sharp your knife is now. And I'm going to show you the technique that is widely used for this. This is the way all chefs are going to be chopping in proper kitchens. And that's going to be holding it with your hand, right? So you don't want your hand up here. You want your hand back on the handle, and you're going to be rolling. Let me see, can you get an angle of that? Okay. You need a rolling chop. You should always have part of the knife on the cutting board, unless your piece of food is too high, in which case you'll come up like this and maybe this. I'm going to show you an example of how this works and also give you a little sustainability tip at the same time. So this is some thyme that we'll be using today in the recipe. And whether or not you know this, actually, you can use a lot more of the thyme than people actually do. Lots of people just, spend so much niggly time getting these little leaves off. You can actually chop up those whole little stems there. So the main stem is going to be too hard, but I'm just going to pull all of the thyme off of there. And I'm going to do two things here. So I'm going to use that rolling method, and I'm also going to put my guard in place. So my guard is my knuckles. So I never, ever want to cut like this, right? Even though you'll see lots of people doing it, maybe holding, this is a piece of tempeh, holding something like that. Your fingertips are at risk. So what you want to be doing is putting your knuckles against the blade and tucking your fingers under. So here you can see I'm going to do it this time. I'm going to go ahead and keep my knuckles there and just quickly chop. I'm going to use my knife also to scrape back and forth. Right, so you can see how important it is to actually just protect yourself. I'm going to go ahead and cut this tempeh as well. I'm going to use that rolling motion. and I'm going to be using my knuckles as a guard. And you can see, I mean, I've been doing this for a while, so you can see these are relatively the same shape. And um, I've cut all the way through because my knife is nice and sharp. And obviously I didn't hurt myself, so I've protected my fingers. um, so yeah, that's a basic on the techniques. Let's have a quick look at the slides just so that you can see what the reminder is going to be when you go to actually have a look at what we talked about today. So let's just have a look at that. So, oh yeah, I also included just some common cuts, so you can have a look at the different terminology that they use for a square dice or a long dice. So those are the various sizes, they're the various types of dices, and then when people talk about julienne, they're those long slices. All right. So let's talk a little bit about developing flavor. So as I mentioned, you really need to get away from relying on the fat and flavor that comes from cheese and meat when you start to cook more plant-based. So you think through the different flavor profiles that you have. That would be sweet, sour, bitter, salt, and umami. And umami is just a term that has come up in the last few years. It's always been around, but it's really just been popularized by shows like Top Chef. And it's really just that sort of warming, yummy, sort of a deeper flavor. You'll get that from things like soy sauce, miso, um, a tomato might have roasted tomato might have more of an umami flavor. So those are just some of the various flavors that you're going to be able to play with. And that's going to give you some good ways to balance out a meal if when you start tasting it, it's not tasting as you expect, right? So we're going to cover some of these things as we start the cook, and let's pay attention to time. Oh, so I think that I need to start soon, right? Does that say 11:19? It does. So we'll get started cooking soon. And again, you're going to have access to these slides. This recipe, we're going to do a little bit of cooking, and then it'll go into the oven for 20 minutes. So we'll stop, and then we're going to cover some of the plant-based ingredients, but I'm also going to talk about them as we go through this. This first point is how we're going to start off, which is getting heat directly on your spices is super important. So if you actually just throw your spices in, sorry, just have to stop share for a second. If you're just throwing your spices in a pot that's like, say, already boiling, you're not going to get as deep a flavor. What you want to do is get your spices on some heat so it'll help them bloom and help them combine with one another. So I'm going to move this uh, camera now over to the stove just so that you can watch me as we get started here. And I'm going to do two things because I've got the worst oven in the world and it takes forever to preheat. So I'm going to preheat it. I'm actually going to preheat it to 400. And yeah, it's going to give me a problem. All right, so I'm going to start heating up my pan. And I'm going to continue to get irritated with my oven. It really just doesn't want to start sometimes. I don't know, sometimes you have to massage the start button. This just is really the worst oven. There we go. All right. So now it's behaving. So I'm starting to heat my pan. And I've got all of my ingredients over here. This is something that I wanted to show you. So when I'm doing a recipe, and a lot of the times these plant-based recipes might have a few more ingredients because we're trying to develop a lot more flavor. So what I've done is I actually put them in order that I'm going to use them because I don't want to have to keep going back to the recipe. So I've got everything that I'm using in order, and then you see where that spoon is? That spoons means to me, I'm going to cook for 20 minutes before I put any the rest of those items in there. They're either for finishing or after my initial cook. This is actually a garnish, which I know. But this is just in order so I don't even have to look at these recipes. Just makes it way more handy. Okay, let me see if I can get in here and hopefully you can see that okay. I'm going to go ahead and put in half of my oil for this lentil shepherd's pie and just let that start to heat up. Now, you can actually cook this and many other dishes without oil. So if you're trying to cut down on the oil in your food, you can do that. What's really interesting is that as a pan heats up like this, it goes through an actual, like a chemical process where the bottom of the pan starts out with all of its pores open. And as it gets hotter, the pan itself, the molecules, tighten. And when they're really, really tight, things won't stick to your pan. So if you get it hot enough, you'll be able to tell that this is the stage if you like drop some water on it and it forms into a little ball instead of just sizzling away. And that way you can cook without oil. We're going to use oil today because there's not very much fat other than the tahini in this recipe. And one of the things that we need to remember in terms of nutrition is that fat is important, right? That fad where everybody was making or having low fat diets is actually bad. We need fat. We need fat to help us feel full. And we need good fat in any case, just to help fuel our body. It also helps to carry nutrients through our body. So there's lots of vitamins that are actually only, they can only travel through our bodies on fat molecules. So making sure that we have those fat molecules available for them is super important. I'm going to show you one of my favorite tools too before we get started. This is called a bench scrape. And it's super handy to have and actually helps you keep a really clean kitchen. But when you've got big piles of things like these onions, I can just put it right on my bench scrape and throw it in. Now, I mean, I wish this was like a video where I could waft the scent to you, but I'm starting to smell my olive oil heating up now. I'm pretty sure that it's pretty close to ready. Yeah, and you can see it's really moving. It's actually a little too hot, so it's hit its smoke point. So let's turn that down a little bit, just let that cool. I was obviously talking too much. That's usually not my problem, so here we go. Let's put that back there. Okay, and I'm going to start off with my onions. And this is like sort of the basis of almost every dish we cook is going to be some delicious onions. So I almost immediately turn the heat down after it's ready so the onions don't burn. But there we have it. I'm going to move the speaker. Are you hearing me okay? Yeah? Okay, good. Maybe I'll move it a little bit closer there. All right. Okay, so we're going to let that cook away just for a minute. And the other thing that I'm going to mention is that while in the recipe, it probably calls for a teaspoon of salt, I salt throughout. So how I think about it is I just put in, a bunch of ingredients about that size, and they're going to need some seasoning. I don't want to over salt. And every time I pick up a pinch of salt, I'm picking up about 1/8 to 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. So I'm just putting on some salt now, just a little bit. And you do whatever you're most comfortable with, but I like to salt throughout and I like to taste throughout as well. You can see I've placed a bunch of small spoons here. That's mostly because it seems sort of gross to be like constantly double dipping, which if you weren't here, I would definitely be doing. But just so that, it doesn't look so gross. I've got all these spoons so I can taste as many times as I want. All right, I can smell those onions. I'm getting some aroma. Now I want to make sure that the temperature is started to lower because adding our garlic is a critical point. We love the taste of garlic, but it also burns super quickly. So let's make sure we don't burn the garlic. Throw it in. I'm going to throw it in the same time as my thyme and rosemary. In they go. And again, let's give that a little stir. Now I'm trying to get some heat on those spices, but I also know my pan's a little hot. So I'm still mixing it around, but also letting it settle from time to time so it starts to heat up. And you'll start out just with a light smell, and then that smell will start wafting over and over again. Uh, oh, I can really smell the rosemary. You can use dried spices for this. I prefer fresh, but you can use dried spices. You just use maybe a teaspoon and a half or 2 teaspoons of each of those spices. And if you like really intense flavor, you can actually add more flavor as well. Like if you wanted to do a tablespoon and a half of fresh, you can do that as well. Oh, that's got a good smell. All right, so I'm gonna throw in my tomato paste. And again, the joy of cooking is that it's not like baking. You don't have to be perfect. So I'm throwing in this is roughly 4 tablespoons. I think it might just be a little bit more. Now, this next piece is an important technique in getting additional flavor in your dish. So I put that tomato paste in there. I really want it to start browning. So it's going to change color. And it combined with the onions and the spices are going to start sticking to the pan. And you might think that's bad. It's not. It's perfect. It's exactly what we want. We really want flavor sticking to the pan because then we're going to deglaze it with our red wine. Or today, what I'm doing, because we're on a dry January kick, we are using Proxies, which is a dealcoholized wine. It's not an ad. I get no affiliate revenue from them. But we'll use the Proxies, or you could use you might use a little bit more tamari or something like that. Or a juice you could use, just nothing too sweet. But can you see that we're starting to get a little bit of the tomato sticking to the plate? Does that show okay for you? And you can see the tomato is starting to brown a little bit. And that browning again is awesome. It's really going to help to develop the flavor, make sure that all of those flavors are mixing together. And then when we deglaze with the Proxies, it's going to give us a nice sizzle. I'm actually going to turn this up a little. It's going to give us a nice sizzle. And then it's going to, I'm going to scrape up everything that's sitting on the bottom of the pan. And that's going to put all sorts of this additional flavor that's developing in that pan into the sauce. I'm actually just going to throw the paprika in here as well while we do this. Get a little bit of heat onto the paprika. I think I called for it later in the recipe, but we'll go ahead and put it in now. And that is getting a nice deeper red color. So let's go ahead. There we go. We got a good sizzle. If it was red wine, it probably would have sizzled a little bit more with the alcohol content, but this is perfect. I'm scraping this up. And then I'm going to work quickly to add in my lentils, which I've already portioned, drained, and washed. And the vegetable stock that we're using. Now you can add the vegetable stock a little bit at a time, but I was just going to talk a little bit. So so I added it in all at once. You got to remember every time you add something in, you're cooling down the pan. So it's better to keep it a little bit hot. Normally I would add a little bit and then add a little bit more. But I didn't this time. And this is actually going to cook for, let's say, about 20 minutes once it's heated up. So I'm gonna heat that up, and then we're gonna leave this. I'm gonna be a good cook and take these over to the sink and just place them in there, clean as you go. Oh, and remember about the salt, right? So we added the tomato paste. So I put in a little salt to the tomato paste. I would typically do that earlier, and I'm adding a little bit more for the lentils as well. Give that a good stir. This isn't going to taste super yummy right now, but I just want to make sure that I'm not over salting. So no, that's really good actually. Yeah. Yeah. So let me put this over in the sink and I'll come on back. All right. So I'm going to bring you back over to my chopping table as we let that cook, and we're going to let it simmer behind me for 20 minutes, usually is what it takes to get the lentils nice and hot and absorbed. So what you're looking to do right now is to absorb all of the liquid in the pan pretty much. It'll turn fairly thick, and we'll be testing for the texture of the lentils. So the lentils are going to be, it might just still have a little bit of firmness to it, a little bit of texture, but they'll be nice and uh, delicious and not. It's like a fine line. They're not going to cook a ton more in the oven, but they will cook a little bit more. So we just want to make sure we get it just right.
Hey, Chrissy, quick question. Ground, is it raw lentils or?
So we've used the dried lentils. You can use them from the can, but they tend to be pretty mushy when they come out of the can. So if you're looking at for the texture to be closer to that, which you might have in a traditional shepherd's pie, you'll want to use dried lentils. But do make sure that you rinse them and take out any stones or anything like that that sometimes come in dried lentils. But they're cooking, they're going to cook, or they are cooking right now while we are doing this. If you were using, yeah, you'd have to change things up a little bit if you were using canned lentils because they wouldn't absorb, they're already cooked, they wouldn't absorb the liquid, I don't think. I've only ever used dried lentils. Okay, we're boiling, so I'm going to turn this down. And just let it simmer away. Hopefully I can watch that behind me. I'm gonna put on the timer because if I don't, I will forget. So we're gonna put in for 20. And you can, like lentils are they vary slightly. Like these are green lentils. I have brown lentils as well that are a little bit smaller. We don't use red lentils for this recipe because they tend to break apart quite a bit and they're usually split in half. But these are green lentils, and they might absorb more, or they might need more liquid than I actually put in there. So I could add some more. Um, they if they're not absorbing that much, we just cook for a little bit longer and it evaporates. So it's totally fine. All right, so now we're going to talk about some plant-based ingredients and flavors. So one of the things that sometimes people struggle with is the plant-based proteins. So we're going to start there. And I'm going to go down here. So we're going to talk tofu, first of all. We're going to talk tofu, and there's several different treatments of tofu, and maybe some people think that they don't like tofu. And I challenge that a little bit because a lot of the times when people say they don't like tofu, it's because they've had tofu one way. And tofu is really just a sponge for other flavors. So it could be that, with the right marinade, your mind might be changed if you don't like tofu. So I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to handle tofu. So one is shredding, and it's just simple. Like I don't even you hear people press tofu. I don't press the tofu. I just shred it right in a grater. And you can use that in anywhere where you might use like a crumble. You can just cook it with some olive oil on in a pan like this one here. The one other thing that you can do with it, which is pretty cool, and in the recipe document, there's an Instagram video that shows you exactly how it's done. But you can turn it into these like little crispy strips. So let me show you what I've got here. So this here, if you can see it, let me bring it a little closer to you. This was tofu that was shredded on a grater. And then I just took it, I put it on a pan with a silpat sheet, and I drizzled olive oil on it. I shook some paprika on it, some salt and pepper, and I went like this, and then patted it down flat. I put it in the oven at 400 degrees for 30 minutes. Let it cool. When it came out, it looked a little brown, and I rolled it up, and then I just used my chopping technique to cut it into these little strips. And this is like, do you get the sense of how crispy that is? It's really delicious and crispy. This is like a delicious snack. Like if you're hankering for a snack of something high protein, delicious, healthy, this has very little fat in it. It's just got the olive oil. This is beautiful. It's so delicious. The other way people will do tofu is, let me just I'm grabbing a big hunk of tofu, which is wrapped right now in a towel. Because if you do, if your recipe does call for tofu that is pressed, it's usually to get the water out, so it's going to absorb and keep more flavor. So just think about it. If there's all sorts of water that's left in the tofu, then that's going to come out in cooking as well. So you're trying to get the water out so that it absorbs more of the flavor. So you can just press this underneath anything. You don't need a tofu press. I typically will press it under our cast iron pan. This one I didn't actually end up pressing, but it's a fairly dry tofu actually. And the one thing that I want to mention in particular about tofu is just to keep in mind that adding flavor to tofu in particular is really impacted by the amount of surface area that's exposed, right? Because it essentially it mostly doesn't have much of a taste to it. The more surface area that you expose, the more ability it has to absorb flavor, and any of the flavors that you want. So typically when we do tofu, I'm going to do it in smallish chunks. We do bigger chunks too. But I'll do it. I'm not going to do the whole thing. But you can see, I'll do it in like some basic chunks like this. And this again is the knife technique where I'm not rolling, right? But I'm going straight down and I'm still using my guide there. And you can see these are nice small chunks. The other thing that you can do and is very popular to help tofu absorb flavor is freezing. So you can take the package right home from the grocery store, toss it in the freezer, and then take it out, thaw it. Some people double freeze, so you freeze it again and then bring it out, and it opens the holes. So it opens the holes in it, so it sucks in more flavor. We have like really great success just cooking tofu like this, but lots of people will actually look to manipulate it a little bit further. All right. So the other thing that you can do with tofu is turn it into cheese. So tofu can actually be blended and mixed with other ingredients and turned into like a cheese type flavor. And the other thing that we'll use for making a cheese, just while we're on the subject, is cashews. So you can use cashews, and if you hear soaked overnight, they don't always need to be soaked overnight. If you have a Vitamix or a Blendtec or a high-powered blender like that, as long as you soak them in boiling water or boiled water for at least 10 minutes, they'll soften enough to make a beautiful sauce. And the other thing, while we've got cashews here, I'll make is a cashew parmesan that is delicious. That's my oven just telling me it's hot enough. It's totally delicious. So it's all it is cashews not soaked. So dry cashews, nutritional yeast, garlic powder, and salt. And you just blitz it, like little blitz, and any blender will do for that. You're just trying to get it into a little bit of think of how like that Kraft Parmesan is, like it's a little grainy. And it's delicious on toast. It's perfect on pasta. If you are topping any sort of a dish that typically calls for a dairy Parmesan, it makes for a really nice Parmesan. I'm just going to go back to my document and double check that. Okay, so the other things, I'm just double checking. I don't need to look back. I have this cheat sheet over here, this whiteboard that I can look at if I've totally forgotten something. So tofu, we talked about shredding, we talked about pressing and marinating, and you can also crumble it. So I use it crumbled in a scramble. So if you look at it like this and I just crumble it, like it sort of has a look of an egg. right? So it sort of has an eggy look. So we just add various ingredients. On the Zesty Plan website, there's a rainbow tofu scramble recipe that's really good. I usually eat that for breakfast, or we'll sometimes have it for brunch on the weekends. And it just makes a nice egg dish. And we usually add turmeric, so it has that nice yellowy color. Um, anyways, so that's that. I'm making a mess of myself, so I'm going to switch cutting boards. Let's grab this other one over here. And I'm grabbing a plastic cutting board, but I'm trying desperately not to use plastic. I'm sure everybody's heard that you're cutting little plastic pieces off when you cut into it, but desperation, we're using plastic. The other thing that you can do with tofu, and many people do, is batter it. So do a little batter with, you can use chickpea flour, you can use, if you want a replacement for an egg wash, you can use aquafaba, which is the juice from a chickpea can. You can also whip that aquafaba into meringues if you want to use it for a dessert, interestingly enough. So that's another use of it. The other thing, let's head back over to tempeh since we're on the topic of the proteins. I'm going to give the lentils a quick stir over here, just to make sure that they're going. I think I want them to be boiling a little bit more vigorously, so I'm going to turn it up. There we go. You got about 10 minutes left on that. Okay, so let's talk tempeh. So what is tempeh? Tempeh is made of the same stuff as tofu. It's soybeans. But you can see right here from the texture, it's just got a little bit more texture to it. So it's not going to have like as smooth a taste. It's actually quite a bit more, I'm going to say chewy, for lack of a better word. And you can see the little strips that I made earlier. What we tend to do is turn this into a tempeh bacon. So you can do it in strips, you can do it in cubes if you want to do like bacon bits, but I'm just going to show you how quick and easy it is to do a tempeh bacon, and at the same time tell you about some of these more common ingredients. Let me see if I can get a little more FaceTime with you. Okay, so for a tempeh bacon, soy sauce, and again, I love cooking because it's not as precise as baking. I like baking as well, but I really have to follow a recipe. So I put in soy sauce. I'm going to put in some liquid smoke. Has anybody used liquid smoke before? This is just an amazing ingredient to use in plant-based cooking for sure. I'm going to be careful. This one comes out super fast. So we're going to throw a little bit of liquid smoke in here. I'm going to toss in some olive oil. Again, super easy. And I'm using a couple of tablespoons of each, let's say. And I can smell it already starting to smell like bacon. It's crazy. And I like a maple bacon. So I'm going to put in a little bit of maple syrup. You don't have to put it in, but it just adds that little extra delicious sweetness. And I'll just give this like a quick whisk with my mini whisk. Oops. There we go. And throw this in here and give it a toss. And this, just like tofu, just sucks up flavor. So you can do this like the night before and put this in the fridge and get a whole bunch of these people pieces. We're going to cook the people pieces, soaking up the flavor. And then I just put this, I fry it in a pan like I would bacon, but I add some oil. And it is truly delicious. We use this on Caesar salads, even just served with that delicious scramble that I was mentioning earlier. It's, any time that you would have something with bacon on it, you can use this, and it is truly delicious. And it does have that extra, it's like a thick bacon. It's not like a thin bacon. It doesn't get as crispy, but it does get a little bit of a crisp on the outside, which is really nice. And just while we are talking crispy, there was one other little hack that I wanted to show you. I know I'm not sure if anybody's cooking along, but I already have my mashed potatoes cooked over here and ready to go. One of the things that you want to do when you're cooking, I'm sure many of you think this as well, is making sure that we're throwing out as little as possible of the food that we bring home, not only because food is super expensive right now, but also we know that food waste is a big contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. So being able to use up scraps, odds and ends is super important. I'm just going to turn this down a little bit. So what we did this morning when we were making the mashed potatoes is we peeled the potatoes, tossed them with olive oil and salt and pepper, and created these little snacks. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to get close so maybe you can hear this, but can you hear it? It was like a potato chip. They're so good. They are so good.
You did those in the air fryer, Christy?
Air fryer, yeah. What did I say? Oh, I did the air fryer for 5 minutes at 375. Yeah. Yeah, so super good. If you don't have an air fryer, I'm sure the oven works just fine, but delicious. And lots more fiber, potassium, and magnesium coming from the skins of the potatoes, which is super good. We're gonna have lots to eat this afternoon, Robin.
I am down for that.
The other thing, and I'm not going to actually do this, but some people will eat seitan. Some people call it Satan, but it's called seitan. And it is made from vital wheat gluten. So that's the gluten ingredient in wheat. So if you're gluten intolerant or sensitive, this is not the ingredient for you. But a lot of people, when they're trying to actually mimic the texture of meat, will go for a seitan. It's not my favorite, but I think maybe I haven't mastered it as well as other people have, because there's a place here in Toronto where we order sushi from, Tenon Vegan Sushi, and they do a duck that's made of a fake duck that's made of seitan, and it is delicious. It's very delicious. So this is just another one of those plant-based ingredients. The other one, plant-based protein that people will really rely on is edamame. Just because of how high in protein it is, its protein count is higher than its carbohydrate count, so it's a proper protein. And we actually this week toyed around with making a hummus out of edamame, which worked really nicely. So, lots of flexibility there. You could put it on toast, all sorts of stuff. So lots of opportunity. I'm just gonna keep an eye over here. We are starting to see, can you see this? It's starting to reduce a little bit. So I know that those lentils are sucking up the sauce, but it's telling me we've only got 4 minutes left, and I think it's going to need a little bit more time than that, but we shall see. So tempeh, seitan, edamame, and let's have a quick look back at the slides. So there are a couple of other points that I think are worth making here, and I'm just going to go to share again. All right. So we had talked a little bit about the various flavors. So I just put some common combos in here. And that is that tamari, maple syrup, liquid smoke equaling bacon. And then if you're looking, one of the things that we do a lot of in plant-based cooking is curries. So you think about the curry base, you can actually buy a curry paste that's quite lovely and makes that a lot more simple. But if you look at the base of curries, they're usually garlic, ginger, turmeric, cumin, coriander, chili powders, curry powders, garam masala. Have a look at the type of curry powder that you get, because that's going to be influence the type of curry that you're making as well. And there's curries from various regions of the world as well. So we've got some simple ones on our website as well. The other thing that I play with a lot, particularly in sauces, is that lemon pepper combination. So I do a dressing, and this is the combination there with a little bit of oil, lemon, salt, pepper, and I use that maple syrup. We use maple syrup all the time. And I give it a shake, and it's like absolutely beautiful just on plain lettuce leaves. Like it's really, really nice. And mushrooms and miso. And then if you're looking like the more sort of Italian flavors, that basil, oregano, um, rosemary, sage, thyme, those flavors all work there as well. Um, and I don't know if I mentioned this earlier or not, but I think I might have. You know, just getting familiar with some of those flavors will help you be able to play with the dish when it might not be coming together exactly as you thought it was. Like, so if you're tasting it and it feels like it's missing a little bit, you feel like you've adequately seasoned it with salt and pepper. It might be missing some sort of acid, maybe some lemon, maybe some tomato, maybe something that just adds in that extra bit. Maybe you want to add a little bit of heat in there. Try adding a little bit of heat, or a little bit of sweet with some honey or agave syrup or maple syrup, whatever your favorite sweetener is. So one of the things that is also great for adding flavor to your dishes is using vegetables that are roasted first. So it just pulls out a lot of the natural sweetness and adds real richness to the vegetable flavor. The lower the moisture content in the vegetable, the easier it is to tease out that flavor. So if you're using some vegetables that have high moisture content, those would be things like mushrooms and tomatoes. If you put them in the oven to roast at the same time as your other vegetables, you might end up more with steamed vegetables than roasted because they're releasing water and the oven is holding the water. Right. So they're better done in different ways or done in a separate place together, and you can wait until the water is out of them. So that's just the timer for my lentils. I'm going to use one of my handy dandy spoons and taste them and see how they're doing. I think that they seem still very thick. So I think another 5 minutes is going to be fine. That's just, oh yeah, those are really coming along. And you can see most of the liquid is reduced. I'll bring you back over to the pan in just a minute. I'm just going to set this for another 5 minutes. All right. So the other tip for roasting and just making sure that it's a uniform dish, and roasting is pretty forgiving, to be honest. But if you try and keep the things that you're cutting up of uniform size, yeah, that's the dog. Okay, of uniform size, then it helps with the beauty of the dish in the first place. And you know, we eat the dish with our eyes before our mouths. And it also helps to make sure that you don't have some undercooked stuff and some overcooked stuff. Why am I getting a request to record their computer? I'm just going to try and get out of this for a second. Has this been recording? Let's hope so. It is. It's still recording. Yeah, I don't know why I'm getting a notification that says Christy Sadler is requesting to record their computer. I am Christy Sadler. All right. So anyways, let's keep going. You can see this. It still looks like it's recording, right?
That's fine.
Yeah. All right. Okay, let's keep going. I'll try, and I'm just going to approve myself. And all right. Sorry about that. All right. So this is a special. I wanted to just spend a little bit more time on mushrooms. I don't know about you, I love mushrooms. And since starting to pay more attention to pulling out flavor in what I cook, I learned that I'd been doing it all wrong with mushrooms. So when you cut mushrooms and you're doing them in the pan, if you add salt to them right away, they're going to release their water right away. Right? So if they release their water right away, then you're boiling your mushrooms essentially. But if you put them in the pan with a little bit of oil and just leave them there So don't disturb them. Don't add salt to them. They're gonna start to get that caramely look on the outside before they release their water. So what they're gonna do is they're gonna get this caramelness, and you eventually do stir them a little bit, but they're starting to look like you see in the picture there throughout this process. Then they get it on the other side, and then they release their water, and then they absorb the flavor that was developed in the bottom of the pan. Remember how we had that red from the tomato paste in the bottom of the pan when we were cooking? The same thing's going to happen with these mushrooms. They're going to get a little bit of that caramelization in the pan. They're going to release their water. Then that delicious flavor that's developed is going to coat them again. It just makes for like amazing, amazing flavor in mushrooms. So that was just a special circumstance. All right, we're going to go back over to the dish and continue on. Let's finish off this lentil shepherd's pie. And I'm gonna say this is one of those dishes, like, no, it's not gonna taste like beef. It doesn't taste like beef, but it's a delicious dish on its own. So, I've mentioned this, that we have a mix of eaters in our house. Some people eat meat, some people don't. Everybody loves this dish. All right. So, oh, sorry, I forgot to grab my other little ingredients over here. That is boiling away. I'm actually going to lower the heat, and excuse me while I cross your screen. There we go. Let's pull you back over here. So this last thing that we're going to do, you can see this is like, it's pretty much all soaked in. The last thing that we're going to do is add in this tahini, and I'm going to mix it around like that. I'm going to add in my balsamic vinegar and soy sauce or tamari. And I'm going to add in this corn. The other thing some people like to add into a shepherd's pie is carrots. So you could do diced carrots in there as well, would be nice. You could even use frozen, like a bunch more frozen vegetables, like those little cut green beans and stuff like that. And the good rule of thumb for all cooking, not just plant-based cooking, is, whatever it tastes like now, it's going to taste pretty similar. So it's a good time to adjust your seasoning. So, that's tasty. I actually don't think it needs any more salt. Okay, so let's turn off the timer. Make sure that's all heated through. And now we're just going to do the treatment of the mashed potatoes. These have gotten a little hard because I had cooked them earlier, as I mentioned. So usually these would be a little softer and a little bit more forgiving. But one of the techniques, and this is just general, is not, you don't want to put it on and try and smoosh it around from being a big lump, because it'll just end up mixing in with your mixture as well. So I'm just doing little dollops all over the top, and then I'm going to push it down before I put it in the oven. So here we go. Now, one of the other tricks when we're talking about health is, if you're trying to get some more vegetables into your diet, you can actually cut half of these mashed potatoes with cauliflower, and it'll look the exact same. It might taste a little bit lighter, but it's still just as delicious. We've done that before. You can also sometimes, if you want to make it a little bit more creamy, we've used plant milk in here, but you could use like a coconut cream or something that's a little bit richer. Sorry, excuse my fingers. I'm just going to try and make sure that it's all going to spread out on me. And then I'm going to go ahead and throw it in the oven. Now, one of the tricks for making a shepherd's pie look a little bit more beautiful, once you've got this all spread out, is dragging a fork across the top. Robin, do you mind grabbing me a fork? Just forgot to grab one, but you can see that I'm spreading this out. There we go. Thank you. Thanks. Awesome. So this is pretty close to done. But one of the tricks to general mashed potato trick, if you do have I think they're called potato ricers, those little things that you squeeze the potatoes through, or just a ricer maybe. It'll make it really, really like almost like whipped. It's delicious. All right, so we're gonna drag this across the top. It's gonna look better when it comes out than it's going to when it goes in. And then we're gonna top it off with some oil once it's nice and browned on the top, and also some parsley. That is delicious. All right, so now we pop it in the oven. So we'll pop it in the oven for 20 to 30 minutes. I'm gonna set my timer for 20. We might pop it out before, but we'll have a look at it. What we're really looking for is for it to be heated through and nice and brown on the top. So getting that delicious brown look to it. Oops. There we go. All right. Here we are. All right. So now we're going to talk through just some of the other flavors that we use in plant-based cooking. And I'll try and give you more of a sense of when and where we use them as well. So we've talked about cashews and using them in cheese, both cashews and tofu we can use in cheese, but we also use a lot of other nuts, particularly when you want texture within a dish that some otherwise would seem, I want to say mushy. Like we do a black bean burger, and it just needs a little bit of crunch to it. Because if you think about black beans, they're a bit mushy, right? So we can put a ton of flavor in it using all of the flavorings that we've talked about already, some of the ones that we've used in this dish as well. But we'll add walnuts to it. I'll add walnuts to it, like just chopped walnuts, and it just gives like a nice extra crunch. I also do that with a lentil nut loaf, which is delicious, and it has like some of those really nice deep flavors, and the nuts just add a little bit of additional crunch and protein as well. You just have to watch with the nuts because they're also high in fat. So good fat, like very good fat, but they can get the calorie count adding up pretty quickly. The other things that we'll use a lot of would be miso paste. So, which is also really good for you. It's a fermented paste, but we'll use a lot of that because it's got that really rich umami flavor. And then some of the other, like I'd say international flavors, like this gochujang. Whoop, there we go, gochujang. This makes a really delicious sauce. We'll use like a harissa spice blend. We'll do, I would just say that the thing that's really important in plant-based cooking is just making sure that you've planned out what spices that you're going to use in the dish, and err on the over spicing. And I don't mean like heat spices, I just mean seasonings, right? So fresh herbs, seasonings, like think dill, cilantro if you're on team cilantro, and like anything fresh. We actually will sometimes grow fresh herbs in our kitchen. We actually have some mint on the go right now, which isn't our typical kitchen herb because it's so, we grow it outside, usually in the summer, and it's like a weed. So it grows like crazy, but it's nice to have around, and we have it on our countertop right now. One of the great things to do too, if you do buy any of your herbs from the store, I'm just going to grab this to show you. So typically when you get these, we get them from the grocery store here. When you get them from the grocery store, they're pretty much root bound, just meaning there's too many plants for the size of this pot. So you can actually take it and very gently tease it apart and put it into separate plants. And those actually can grow, can keep on growing. We also, to help make sure that these plants continue to grow and that they do well over the winter. We don't get a lot of natural light here. We're in a townhouse. I can show you one of the sort of current projects that's on the go because it's sort of falling apart. But right now we have an under the counter grow light. So we'll this is just falling down right there. We'll put plants right under here and have just these are specially formulated to mimic the light that plants need to grow. And that's also we'll start our seeds, which indoor seed starting season is almost here. Usually it's around this weekend that we start getting some of those going. All right, I'm gonna jump back into the slides and just double check if there's anything in there that I have missed. We were talking mushrooms and sorry, let me just go over here. Here we go. All right, so we were talking mushrooms. This was when we were talking about various sources of protein in plant-based dishes. One of the things that we always have to keep in mind is that pretty much everything that we're eating has protein in it. So all of our other vegetables do as well. But there are some vegetables that are particularly high in protein. So peas, broccoli, spinach, Brussels sprouts, those are all good sources of protein as well. And you just want to make sure that you're eating various things together because the combination of nutrients, they all help each other absorb. You always want to have a little bit of fat to help any of the nutrients that are fat soluble as opposed to water soluble. You want to support the absorption of those nutrients. And all right, so this was just when we were talking about protein. I always want to remind people, one of the reasons that we started Zesty Plan was because of the environmental impact of animal agriculture and what we eat, the choices that we're making 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day, depending on how many times you eat. And people often will ask me, which is the worst protein for the environment. And the one that is having the hardest impact on the environment right now is beef and dairy. So it's the combo with lamb coming in second, but beef is really the one that's fairly insidious, and it's for a number of reasons. It's because of animal agriculture and the deforestation that's involved with it. It's also the fact that we're actually not regenerating the soil and the land that's being used for that agriculture. So it's giving us less and less land to use, and it's water intensive. There's just we're just consuming too much of it. So if you are trying to be more conscious about the proteins that you're eating and their impact on the environment, just steer away from beef. Make beef the treat. And if you do consume beef, you can get more, I want to say, environmentally friendly beef from a regenerative farm. It is going to be a little bit more expensive because they can't fit as many animals, or they can't grow as many animals as you would on a traditional farm. But regenerative farming actually looks after the soil, and they are used for grazing and fertilizing, and it's not the intensive and sometimes inhumane farming that's used with factory farms for beef. And or you can just, if you're going to have beef, if it's a ground beef, you can actually sub that in for like a ground pork or a ground chicken or lentils. So it's, you've got a number of different options. Oh, there was another protein source that I wanted to mention. Wait, I'm coming right back. So you'll see some of these in your grocery. Let me make sure I'm showing the right size. In your grocery store. So these are cauliflowers. This is by Big Mountain Foods. But you always want to look at any of the labels for any of these and for all of your food, right? But have a look at the label and see what it's made of. This is high protein. It's got cauliflower in it, but it's getting its protein from split peas, sunflower seeds, and that's it. But this has 11 grams of protein for one serving, and there's 4 servings in here. So it's a really good alternative protein source. But we do try and source our proteins in a less, the minimal, the less processing, the better. It is for us, right? For us as humans, and the lower the environmental impact as well, too. Let me just jump off of this slide. Okay. All right. So yeah, when you talk about minimally processed, it's like the closer something is to its original form, the less processed it is. And there's a couple of interesting points to that. So, we constantly process our foods. We process it once we bring it home. When we're heating it, we're processing it. When we're chopping it, we're processing it, right? We're changing it from its original form. But when you hear about those highly processed foods that are unhealthy for us, it's that they've essentially done the chewing for us, right? So they've taken what is a uh, a whole food and started breaking it down before it goes into our mouth. So our body doesn't have the benefit of all of the things that come with chewing and absorption and getting the whole food. And every time something is processed, it's changing the composition of it. And there's a lot of those highly processed foods have a lot of added fats and the wrong kinds of fats, and particularly, pardon me, the ones that are made shelf stable, I would worry about if they're not, pretty close to their natural form. But plant-based food can be as unhealthy as animal-based foods if it's highly processed and infused with all sorts of trans fats or anything like that. So you do still have to pay attention to it. This is not. This is like super, super healthy. It's very good. And yeah, so I'm gonna have a quick look here at our. We're coming along. I'm gonna like fast track our dish just so that I can show you how to finish it off, because I feel like we're gonna before we know it be out of time. So as long as this cooperates, the dog is walking between my legs to get his water. I don't know if you can see that. I'm gonna go ahead and broil this. Because really what we're looking for is that nice brown top. So I'm just gonna broil it for a few minutes. And while we sit here, does anybody have any questions that they haven't asked, or is there? Yeah, sounds good. Robin just suggested that, if you do have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we can just queue them up. Otherwise, I'm just looking over here at anything that's, one of the things that I was going to mention talking about processing is one of the things that is interesting about our own processing of foods and our ability to absorb it is heat. So heat changes how our body, or how much energy our body can absorb from food. So when we have, say, a raw carrot, it's, yes, has the same amount of calories as the cooked carrot does, but once it's cooked, it makes it more available for our bodies to actually absorb the vitamins. So it's not to say you should only have cooked or you should only have raw. You should do obviously a combination of both, but the actual heating process does increase our ability to absorb.
But just asking for the name of that?
Oh, the cauli crumbles from Big Mountain Foods, veggie ground.
No.
Amazing. You want to see this again? This is they do a bunch of different sources. Like I think there might be a broccoli one. They also have a tofu that's made without soy. I don't, do you remember, is it mung that it's made from, Robin? Fava. It's made from fava beans. Not this one, but they have one that's made from fava beans that is really good as well. I told you about the chef that we work with for our cooking classes, Tanya Spacek. She prefers this whenever she's putting like pre-made crumbles in. She makes her own veggie crumbles, but whenever she's using a veggie crumble, she'll typically use this one. She really, really likes it. I'm gonna have a quick look and make sure we're not burning our dish. Nope, starting to get brown. I also made a mess on the stove, so just ignore that. And let me grab my trusted oven mitts. Well, I hope everybody's been enjoying the class and that you've got some helpful tips. I'm going to not quite pull this out yet. It is almost ready. I can tell you a little bit more about making that seitan dishes as well. So that's this vital wheat gluten. So usually if you're trying to make a dish with seitan in it, you'll mix it. It's like, it'll feel like flour, but you'll mix it with usually like I'd say a bouillon, like a veggie bouillon or something like that. Some of the recipes will call for blending it with other protein sources like chickpeas, but you need to you turn it into a flour, and then typically you'll wrap it tight, either boil or steam it. And then once that part is done, you're going to slice it into strips or break it into pieces, however you want it to look, before you soak it and marinate it or batter it and fry it, depending on what you like. I don't tend to like deep fry anything, but lots of people will do like little chicken strips and stuff like that. And with this, we've had good luck doing it for a mock turkey. The other little trick that people will sometimes do, if you're cooking a vegetable or a vegetable plant-based dish, and you're missing like the crispy skin that you might get on like a salmon or on um, turkey at the holiday season or something like that, people will take these little rice paper, and you soak them to make them soft. And then you wrap them around whatever your protein source is, and maybe brush a little plant-based butter over the top, some salt, or a mixture of the spices that you're using. I'd say if it was like a turkey or a chicken, you might want to use those like rosemary and sage and thyme and those sorts of spices. And then you just hide the crease underneath, and it turns into like a great crispy skin over the top. And it has that same sort of flavor if you're using the same sort of flavors that you might have used in a poultry dish. All right. Let me see if I can pull this puppy out now. All right, yeah. Let's pull it out. Don't touch the handle, whatever you do. Okay, let's put that over there. And let me bring this over so you can see what the finishing process is. And again, just always try to make it look delicious. People, if they know that they're eating plant-based, sometimes if they're not big fans of plant-based eating, they might be a little judgy. Also, you want it to look good for yourself. So, I think I said this before, we eat with our eyes before we eat with our mouths. So a really nice way to finish this off is to just drizzle some really nice oil over the top, and then add some parsley. So you can see I'll just take the remainder of this oil that I have saved, drizzle it over the top. That just gives a little shine. I'm not sure if it's really showing through on the Zoom camera, but I'm sure you'll be able to see the contrast once you throw a little bit of chopped parsley over the top. It just looks really nice. Yeah. Yeah, so you just get a sense of what this might look like once you pull it out. You might do it in pie-shaped scoops. But can you see there? Like really nice, almost exactly like a shepherd's pie that you might have had with, beef or lamb. It's delicious. It's really, really good. When I told my youngest daughter that we were making this today in class, she said, "Oh, Mom, can you send me that recipe? I really, really like it." And she's a meat eater. So it's one that definitely is a favorite. So I wanted to thank you so much for joining me today. I don't have much more to share with you. I'm going to add a few of the things that we talked about to that document that you have access to. So I'll add a link to the slides in there if you want to have a look at the slides. I'll put in the name of this Collie Crumbles as well, just so that you have that. And yeah, that's all that we've got today. So thanks so much for joining me, and I'll be sending out the recording too. So you'll get a copy of that probably within the next couple of days. I probably want to relax this afternoon, and I've got a lot of food to eat. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.